In this episode of Paul Talk, I bring in Mike Paschke, who is the Senior Strategic Partnership Manager at HireKeep. And the reason I'm bringing him in is because he's not just a business development expert, but he's been helping HireKeep manage all of our strategic accounts. And I want to take this episode to talk about how to strategically manage all of your accounts to gain more traction, more upselling, and then also to make the tough decision when necessary to save the client or to maybe fire the client. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy. So first things first, I want to start by talking about the top account management functions that you deal with every day and what those entail, and go a little bit into depth about what it takes to have true and proper account management within kind of your day-to-day and in general.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing that I focus on when I'm managing our clients at HireKeep are communication, transparency with the client, and obviously managing their expectations. Okay, those are the three biggest things that make it very easy for me to determine ultimately if it's a good client for us to keep and if we can pull more money out of it in the future, or if it's time to maybe part ways with that client.
Got it. And when it comes to communication, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you do to set up proper communication expectations from the get-go and some pitfalls people may run into if they don't do this?
Absolutely. So when I guess for lack of a better term, onboard a new client, I always schedule a call with that client to really kind of talk through what our process looks like and how I think they are going to be best suited for the best results based on certain communication skills that we work through with them.
Got it.
So first thing is always make sure that I'm scheduling a weekly call with all of our clients, at least a weekly call. Sometimes it's more than that. And sometimes I'm also a lot of times communicating on every day via email, or sometimes just jumping on the phone with a quick call. It just kind of depends what the client wants. But telling them, setting the expectations of this is what we think is best, and then putting it all together with what they want to.
Got it. And as far as transparency goes and managing the right expectations, what do you think some mistakes most account managers or maybe people that are just getting into the role may make, and what do you think are some ways to avoid them? Because I know that when we get a new client, initially we're really excited and we sometimes not fib, but we tend to stretch the limits of what's possible, and sometimes even saying I want to call with you every week, especially with people managing SMB accounts, is just simply not possible. So what are some things that you recommend, and what are some pitfalls that you think that we can avoid from the get-go?
Yeah, managing expectations is huge with this part. So I think the biggest mistake that a lot of either early into the career account managers face is they are what I call yes men. So whatever the account says they want, they automatically just say, yeah, we can do that. I think that you need to take a step back and you really need to focus on what is our process at our company. And we don't want to stray from that because ultimately, if you just start doing whatever the client wants, not only are you going to stray away from what the company's vision is, but also when you try to later implement the company vision, they're not going to have it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And out of that point, I think, and Mike and I work together on a regular basis, I think what he does that I think is important, especially if you're in a strategic account management space with clients that will take time to either see results or develop results or kind of streamline the process of your company doing business with their company, I think it's important to make sure that you set up the upfront goals. So that they know what you're trying to achieve in the short term, mid-term, and long term. So for our business, if we want to ultimately get them that initial hire, right, that's really our goal. We want to align that process, and we want to let them know that we are going to be learning based on the feedback that we get from them. And once we learn for that specific role, let's say, we're going to get better and better over time. So letting them know, that we're not perfect and nobody is, but here are the steps that we're taking to get to damn near perfection, is some of the things that Mike does on a regular basis. And again, I just wanted to bring that point up because I know you do that a lot, and that's part of that, managing expectations and transparency piece, so that the client doesn't need to know that you're going to get them 7 deals or your system is going to help them achieve X, Y, and Z in such a long term. I think it's really appropriate to set up a simple, defined early on expectation. And once you hit that expectation, that brings us into a really interesting next phase, which is we're talking about asking for referrals and when to ask for referrals. So talk a little bit about your strategy in asking for referrals, and also what else you can do with a current client that's really happy to gain additional clients, because you know that's less expensive than it is to go out and find a new client.
Absolutely. So this is something that I've always kind of prided myself on in my career, is that I'm really good at being able to get referrals from my clients. And really what I do is you have to be able to know the right time to do that. So I think a big mistake, let's start there with what a lot of account managers or people managing accounts is, they tend to ask too early before they've proven any results.
Yeah.
And so by managing the expectations, you can also manage what you expect them to feel is a good result, right? And when you have that first inkling that they're having that good result and they're getting what they want, say, hey, if you know anybody else that you work with, we can do this for them as well. We can help them the exact same way we helped you. And by doing that, you can greatly build your book of business without having to constantly prospect, because let's face it, we all don't love doing that.
Right, of course.
That's really how we've kind of built a lot of our business, is simply by, after we manage those expectations, we ask for those referrals, because hiring managers hang out with other hiring managers. They know other people in the same space they're in, or even other companies and other types of organizations.
Right.
And so that's, if you make one person happy, they'll give you a
more
number of other people to speak with.
Yeah. And another strategy that I've seen you use, which is a little bit lighter than directly asking for a referral, and this is something that you've done for some of the sales guys that are on our team, as far as making the client or allowing the client or hoping that the client will ultimately make a recommendation or vouch for the business. When do you recommend asking for that? Is that the same period of asking for a referral, or can you do that sooner? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, that's another good point. So unfortunately, there's really no rhyme or reason to when you do this. You have to just really listen to the client, and you have to kind of a mix of figure out what their pain points are in their business that would make them want to spend more money to get more results, as well as kind of that appropriate time where you've done something already well for them. So it's kind of a mix of pain points and good things. And when those align properly is the best time to ask for that upsell.
Yeah, and asking for upsells is definitely a crucial time, but I think that, even before you ask for the upsell, and Mike, I see this all the time, is you can make recommendations to ask if the company is just simply willing to be a reference for another client. And so you can kind of take them step by step. First, ask them if they're willing to be a reference. If they are, that means that, hey, this is my signifier, right? We're always looking for signifiers that tell us that we're being successful with a client. It's always great when they do it on their own, but sometimes a little nudge is appropriate. So first asking them if they are okay with being a recommendation for a new client, then asking them if they do have any referrals as a second step, right? Because they're probably deeper into the process with us. And then 3, once we've kind of gotten them comfortable for both, is a nice time to maybe even swing in for the upsell when you can see that the account starts to perform and you can identify another pain point, like you said,
right,
that you can finally solve for them. Cool. And that's really, really important, because if you miss that sweet spot of the upsell time, you kind of got to wait all over again until they get to that point.
Starting all over.
Yeah, wow, that's actually really important. So we got to keep that in mind. As a final topic, especially when you're working at a startup, or let's just say that you're starting to rapidly grow, resources tend to grow slower than the clients do in many cases, and so a lot of times we have to make some decisions. So underperforming clients exist. You're just not going to make everybody happy. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on what decision-making process you go through to, number one, decide whether it makes sense to save a client when they tend to be underperforming. What are some of the thoughts that you have? And then second to that, when do you think it makes sense to fire the client? Because I think sometimes firing the client removes them from the ecosystem a lot more amicably. Maybe they're just at a different stage or require more than a company can offer. So what are your thoughts on saving clients and firing clients, and what do you use to make those determinations?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I really look at is how bought into our process is the client. And that's really the biggest determining factor, and also the first thing I look at. If it's a client that maybe we haven't gotten the revenue out of them like we hoped, or it's not performing like we hoped, but they're very bought into our process. They are constantly on their weekly calls with me. They're doing everything that we would want a client to do. Absolutely 100% worth saving, because eventually you're going to have that happen. And we've had clients like that where it's maybe taken a few months for it to really come to fruition. But they've been bought into our process. They've worked with us the way that we have hoped a client would work with you. And in terms of firing the client, that's also the biggest factor, right? So if they don't want to, if they're constantly fighting you, if they constantly think that they have a better idea, or they just don't want to use any of the services that you're offering them, they just want a result, it's tough to make a client like that happy. And I'm sure everybody out there watching knows you've all had clients like that where even if you make them happy, they're still not happy. They're never going to be happy.
Definitely.
So don't waste any more of your company's resources, any more of your resources or your time. It's time to cut it. Yeah,
I agree with that. And sometimes it's tough to cut a client when you see such a tremendous potential of revenue. Your goal as an AM is to keep the clients happy and keep the clients moving forward. But sometimes it is okay to sever the relationship, at the appropriate point, because I think that if the client continues to spend, if the client is making requests outside the scope of what's possible, that's just going to continue, I think, and that's just going to increase. And like you said, if the client isn't really utilizing all the resources and just looking for a result, it's really difficult to create additional value for that specific client. So that's a decision that you're going to have to make as an account manager, as a business development person constantly, whether you're pursuing clients to spend more money with you, or if you're simply just trying to figure out where is this client's ultimate value for the organization. So I think that was really insightful, and I hope that you guys out there have seen some value or have come across some of this. Thanks so much for being with us, Mike. I really appreciate you coming out here and telling us what's what.
Absolutely.
It's been really successful at not only keeping our clients really, really happy, but being really, really direct and honest with people. I think that they appreciate that the most, because we live in a world of a lot of fluff, a lot of ads, a lot of BS. And so I think that it's a breath of fresh air when you're really straight to the point and you're real with someone, and they don't feel like you're constantly trying to sell them or pull one over on them. You tell it how it is, because it's either going to be good, somewhere in the middle, or bad. And if you've got the guts to do it and to take them in all three ways, I think the client will ultimately appreciate that, because, and we've done some research on this, the final thought here is most clients just want the communication. That was Mike's initial point. They just want to be talked to. They just want to know the status. They, most of the time, don't even give a shit if it's really bad. They just want to know what's going on, right?
You will never lose a client for being too honest.
Yeah, and too communicative. Yeah, and too communicative. Yep. Awesome. Comment, like, share, please, with all your colleagues. If you have an experience where you've had successful turn of a client from being a bad client to being a great client, or if you had some successful upsell strategies that you want to share, we'd love to hear them. Paul Talk out. Prove that you can get it done. Don't even talk about the fact that you want to be an AE. Don't give it a time frame, because leaders, sales leaders, VPs, they're not crazy. If you're in there killing it and they're not promoting you, then they're no better than the other company that you were at where you were doing well and didn't get promoted.